Hello everyone, it's Foo here, and today I want to talk to you about some huge buffs that are happening to Pokemon that return in Pokemon Legends Arceus. So if you want to avoid spoilers for that game completely, then this may not be the video for you, but I won't be talking about any new Pokemon, so I won't spoil you on that, and I won't be talking about any of the new moves either. These are just old Pokemon that are getting access to moves that have existed for a long time for the first time in this game for whatever reason. So these are big buffs and could have a massive impact on the game, which is really exciting. These moveset buffs were found from the data mine leak that came from Pokemon Legends Arceus, so that's how we know about them. It's worth noting that Pokemon Legends Arceus removes a lot of moves from the game. Of the 800 plus moves that have featured in previous Pokemon games, Pokemon Legends Arceus only has 180 moves, which is not many, and that may be one of the reasons why a lot of these Pokemon are getting access to older moves for the first time. It's because the moves that they have been using previously have been removed from the game and they need something to replace that with. But if they keep those moves in future games where you can have battles with other people, it could have a really big impact on the competitive meta. So, some Pokemon have got really massive buffs and I can't wait to tell you about them. I thought I'd start with some overlooked Pokemon that have got some really nice changes that give them a bit of a leg up, and then move on to the really big ticket items where Pokemon have fundamentally changed because of the new moves that they get access to. The first one I want to talk about is a really funny one. So, Beautifly gets access to Air Slash for the first time, which may come as news to a lot of you that Beautifly didn't already learn Air Slash. But it had such a limited move pool that its best flying type coverage was Air Cutter, which is a very low base power move. So this is actually a really nice move for Beautifly to learn. Beautifly is not got great stats, but its special attack stat is actually pretty high, and Air Slash really boosts the damage potential of this Pokemon. So that's a really nice buff for Beautifly, and if you are a Beautifly fan, then it's definitely something to be happy about. However, take it with a grain of salt because Beautifly does not get access to Quiver Dance in this game. It's one of the moves that has been removed, which is a bit of a shame because Quiver Dance really helps those butterfly Pokemon, which generally have relatively low stats, get by. It boosts a lot of their stats and they become a lot better. So it remains to be seen if Beautifly will be any good in this game, but in future games where it may have Quiver Dance and Air Slash, it could be a lot better than it used to be. Another slightly random one is that Drifblim now gets access to Mystical Fire. I think this is pretty nice because it gives Drifblim fire type coverage that it never had before. Ghost and fire generally go quite well together. Unfortunately, Drifblim still doesn't get any good flying type special coverage, which is slightly unfortunate. But Drifblim's hidden ability Flare Boost allows it to boost its special attack stat when it's burned, and having good special coverage could make a special attacking Drifblim much more viable. So I really like to see this change, and I think Drifblim is a very interesting Pokemon now that it does have Mystical Fire, especially because in previous games it's got access to Strength Sap, which heals Drifblim and drops the opponent's attack stat. Mystical Fire drops the opponent's special attack stat, so now it's got moves that can drop attacks on both sides of the spectrum. So Drifblim could turn into this very bulky, tanky Pokemon that's dropping the opponent's offenses and healing up. So I think that's a really cool concept and a nice little buff for Drifblim there. Moving on to Cherrim, this Pokemon now gets access to Sleep Powder, which I think is really nice. I've played around with Cherrim before, and in doubles, it's a very nice support Pokemon in the sun because you give your ally an attack and special defense boost in the sun, which is really, really good. But Cherrim has had kind of a limited support move pool until now. Sleep Powder really changes that. It makes it a much more threatening support Pokemon. Being able to put the opponent to sleep while buffing up your partner Pokemon passively is huge, and that's a really, really nice boost for Cherrim. Another weird one is Mr. Mime gets access to Iron Defense. I'm only pointing this out because I found it pretty funny. Mr. Mime always had access to the move Barrier, which gives you +2 defense when you use it. In Pokemon Sword and Shield, Barrier was removed from the game, so Mr. Mime no longer could boost its defenses, which seemed really strange for a Pokemon that's all about barriers, putting up walls, and being relatively defensive. Now it gets access to Iron Defense, which it didn't have before, but does the same job as Barrier. So now it can do what it did before, but that was removed from the game. So that's pretty nice for Mr. Mime, but it's definitely not game changing and probably won't change it competitively at all. I want to talk about Tangela and Tangrowth. These now get access to Acid Spray, which is a really interesting move for them. It's a poison type coverage move that drops the opponent's special defense by 2 stages. They did previously have poison type coverage in Sludge Bomb, which was really nice for catching fairy types and other grass types that they might otherwise not be able to hit very well. But Acid Spray, though weaker than Sludge Bomb, gives them an interesting way to be a slightly less passive, because dropping the opponent's special defense stats means that if you keep spamming Acid Spray, you'll get more powerful each turn, and you can then Giga Drain them or whatever to finish them off to do a ton of damage once their special defense is super low. It also prevents Calm Mind setup, because if the opponent's special defense is dropping quicker than they're boosting it, they won't be able to set up on you. And generally, dropping the opponent's special defense could be very helpful to bring in something that's a special attacker the next turn to take them out. So I think Acid Spray has some interesting utility on these Pokemon. However, they generally struggle with 4 move slot syndrome anyway. They've got some really great moves in terms of supporting moves or offensive moves. So whether we actually see this in competitive play, there's a question mark around that, but I do think it's a nice one for Tangela. So now we can move on to some of the bigger ticket items. And the first thing I want to talk about is Recover, because a lot of Pokemon are now getting access to Recover. One of them is Vespiquen. It's maybe less notable than some of the others that I'll talk about, but in Sword and Shield, Vespiquen got access to no recovery moves, which is crazy because it previously had Roost and Heal Order, both of which it no longer had in Pokemon Sword and Shield, which was a travesty. So at least Vespiquen is getting some recovery in this game. Considering it's a bulky Pokemon, it really needs some recovery to have any use at all, so it's nice to see it getting that back. We also see Lilligant getting access to Recover, which isn't so game-changing because it did already have access to Synthesis, but it means that it's no longer got a weather-dependent recovery. Recover is generally a bit more reliable. We've got some legendary Pokemon that learn Recover. Cresselia learns Recover now, which is kind of disgusting. It used to have to rely on Moonlight, which had less PP and was not good in certain weather conditions, so having much more reliable recovery is kind of gross. Mesprit also gets access to Recover, which is pretty nice. It sets it apart from some of the other Pixies, which is really good for Mesprit actually, because Uxie was super bulky and did some really nice support stuff. Azelf was much more offensive, and Mesprit was kind of in this middle place where it did neither particularly well, but now it's got recovery that the others don't have. I definitely think that it's carving itself a niche. And then we've got Shaymin, which has a lot of changes actually. So it gets access to Recover. Reliable recovery is great for Shaymin. It did have Synthesis, but I think Recover is better for this Pokemon. But also, again, it gets access to Sleep Powder, which is huge for Shaymin. It's really, really big. So I think this Pokemon has got some massive buffs, and Shaymin could be a powerful Pokemon going forward. Speaking of Sleep Powder, another really important Pokemon that got access to Sleep Powder is Torterra and the Torterra family. These Pokemon got some massive buffs in this game, so Sleep Powder is really great if you want to run a bulkier wall Torterra. Having Sleep Powder is fantastic. It already had access to like Leech Seed and Synthesis and stuff, so I think that's really great for a bulky Torterra set. But even on an offensive Torterra set, it can be really helpful, because if there's something that you can't break through, put it to sleep and deal with it later. That's the way to do it. So I think that Sleep Powder is massive for Torterra. Not only that, it also got access to Leaf Blade, which it didn't have before, which is a really nice grass type move. It's relatively powerful, more powerful than Seed Bomb, which it had before, and also has an additional chance to land critical hits, which is really, really nice. It still has access to Wood Hammer, which is more powerful than Leaf Blade, but that does come with the drawback of recoil. So having the Leaf Blade is very nice for Torterra as an option that doesn't come with recoil. I think this Pokemon is going to be better than it's ever been. Quite a significant change is that the entire Eevee family now has access to Calm Mind. So Eevee itself probably won't be used because its stats are pretty low, and 2 of its evolutions already had access to Calm Mind in Sylveon and Espeon. For the others, we have Leafeon. Its special attack stat is very low and its attack stat is much higher, so you really should be using it as a physical set. Calm Mind doesn't really work with Leafeon. You've then got Umbreon, which also has a very low special attack stat, but there is potential with Umbreon because it's so bulky that actually setting up Calm Minds does have some potential. If you run a really defensive set and then start bulking up your special defense with Calm Minds, it means that eventually your Dark Pulses will be able to do sufficient damage to the opponent and you can keep recovering up. They won't be able to take you out. So I think that there's some merit for Umbreon. It's just you won't be doing a ton of damage, so you need to watch out for that. So of the remaining Pokemon that didn't have access to Calm Mind that have relatively good special attack stats, Flareon, again, its physical attack stat is better and its defensive stats are pretty low, so I would advise against trying Calm Mind with Flareon. You're much better going with a physical set. Its special coverage isn't very good either. But the remaining 3 Eeveelutions actually use Calm Mind pretty well. So you've got Glaceon that is a very powerful special attacker and it has reasonable bulk too. So both the special defense boost and the special attack boost could situationally be very helpful for Glaceon, and I think that that's a really nice buff for it. Jolteon will really appreciate it. It's generally a fast special attacker and its special defense stat is okay too. So you can definitely set up Calm Minds in the face of a special attacker to tank a hit and then start doing some real damage. So I think that's really nice for Jolteon. But most importantly, Vaporeon loves this move. It's extremely bulky, will be nigh on impossible to KO once you start setting up special defense boosts. Any special attackers will not be able to take this Pokemon out, and it's got a really nice special attack stat already, so when you're boosting that, this becomes a real Calm Mind threat. So this is pretty game changing for Vaporeon. I think we already see a lot of success with certain Calm Mind water types like Suicune, and Vaporeon has some advantages over Suicune. It's got really nice recovery and Wish, and also has the water absorbability, which might be very nice fit for your team. Plus, before you set up, you can pass the wishes around. So I think that Calm Mind Vaporeon could be a huge threat, and that is a real change to this Pokemon. We've got some big winners now. There are 2 winners that learn Spikes for the first time. One of them is Heracross. Heracross is generally a wall breaker that likes a lot of coverage moves, so it might not find room on its sets for Spikes. But the other is Gliscor, which already sets up Stealth Rock as an entry hazard, so having access to Spikes just gives you more options for Gliscor, and Gliscor definitely didn't need any more buffs to be good, but this just makes it even better. So let's talk about Toxicroak gaining access to both Earth Power and Close Combat. It's kind of crazy that this Pokemon didn't already have access to Close Combat, but it does now, which gives it just an extremely powerful fighting type move to spam, and it immediately becomes much more threatening to anything. It basically just ups its damage output much higher than it had before, so that's really great for Toxicroak. Earth Power is really interesting too. So this Pokemon has the ability to be either physical or special, since both of its stats are usable. Its attack stat is better, but its special attack stat is okay, and it does get access to Nasty Plot with some really nice coverage move, things like Sludge Bomb and Focus Blast. It used to struggle getting past poison types because that resists both of its stabs, but having Earth Power is really great, and it just means that it's more matched on the physical and special coverage sides because it did already have access to Earthquake, so now it gets Earth Power as well. That's really great for Toxicroak, so that's definitely a winner and means that it can break through even more walls than it could do in previous games. We also have Scyther and Scizor now learning Close Combat, which is huge because it really allows them to blast through those steel types that might otherwise resist their moves. It's less of a game changer for Scizor because Scizor already had access to Superpower, which could do the same thing. The only issue there being that it drops your attack stat, which means that you couldn't sweep afterwards because you wouldn't be as powerful. Close Combat retains Scizzor's attack stat, so you can bullet punch whatever comes in next and continue your sweep. So it is pretty good for Scizor, but it's not as game changing as it is for Scyther. Scyther is a fast sweeper. If you get a sword stance up, this thing can blast through teams. Simply with flying and fighting type coverage, Scyther can be a monster, and it did not have access to superpower before. Its most powerful fighting type coverage was like Brick Break, so this is a huge damage increase, and Scyther is a much more threatening Pokemon with access to Close Combat. So I would say that Scyther is actually one of the biggest winners out of all. A Pokemon that could challenge Scyther for one of the biggest winners is definitely Togekiss. Togekiss now gets access to Moonblast, which is pretty crazy. So previously it had to rely on Dazzling Gleam as its fairy type stab move, Moonblast gives it a really nice damage boost, almost a 20% damage boost to be precise, which is massive. That's really, really big. But also Dazzling Gleam comes with no secondary effects, whereas Moonblast can drop the opponent's special attack stat. And actually it's got a really nice chance of doing this when combined with Togekiss's Serene Grace ability. That is just going to be insane. You'll be dropping the opponent's special attack stats left, right, and center, and that is huge. Togekiss already has really great special bulk, and if you then are dropping the opponent's special attack stat, special attackers just will struggle so much with Togekiss. So I think this is a massive, massive buff for Togekiss. I really can't believe that it's taken this long for it to get Moonblast, and I think it's a real game changer. So if Togekiss retains this in future games, it's going to be even more of a menace. Let's stick with a fairy type. We can talk about Gardevoir now. They get some really interesting buffs. So Gardevoir is another Pokemon that received Recover that it didn't have before. It previously has had access to Wish, but that is not so great because you have to Wish and Protect for it to be a reliable recovery, and that's 2 of your move slots, whereas Recover is just on your set, you can click it when you need it, and that's great. So it's really reliable recovery. It also got access to some really helpful coverage moves. It got Ice Beam, which can be great for breaking through certain Pokemon that are very weak to Ice type. So things like Gliscor can be really great to take down with this, and Landorus, really great. But I think what's more useful is probably access to Aura Sphere. Gardevoir's Psychic Fairy type stabs are amazing. They have really great coverage. Actually, most of the time for Psychic types, having Fighting type coverage like Aura Sphere is important to hit the Dark types, but that's not so much of a problem for Gardevoir because its Fairy typing already does that. But Aura Sphere allows it to hit the Steel types super effectively. Most Psychic types have to rely on Focus Blast that misses a ton of the time, so Aura Sphere never misses. That's really nice, and it's a really good buff for Gardevoir because now you can hit Steel types all the time, and also the menace that is Tyranitar will be much more threatened by Gardevoir too. So Gardevoir got some really big buffs and maybe is the biggest winner of this entire thing. There's only one more Pokemon that I want to talk about that's the one that I'm most excited for. It probably isn't as crazy game-changing as Gardevoir's buffs, but I think it's really, really cool, and that's going to be Lumineon. Lumineon gets Roost for the first time. Lumineon has been crying out for buffs for the longest time, and I really think that this one is a nice one. It definitely deserves more than just Roost, but Roost is a great start. So Lumineon doesn't have the best stats. What it's previously been used for is like a pivot and hazard remover. So in competitive games, getting rid of Stealth Rock and spikes and stuff is really important, and you can do that with Lumineon with the move Defog. It also gets access to U-turn so that you can pivot around. The issue is that it just gets chipped away way too easily. It's not the bulkiest of Pokemon, so having Roost just means that it will last a lot longer and can do its job there. Maybe in future games when Quiver Dance returns, Lumineon can have its time in the sun and learn Quiver Dance because it is a butterfly fish, but for now, Roost will have to sate my appetite for buffs. So there you have it. That's a run through of all the really important buffs that are coming in Pokemon Legends Arceus. We can only hope that these Pokemon retain their moves in future games where we can actually battle each other and have competitive battles, because I would love to see some of these buffs being retained where you can have abilities and stuff too. These buffs have got me super excited to play Pokemon Legends Arceus, and I hope you all really enjoy the game when it comes out. But that's going to be all for today. I've been Foo, you've been awesome, and hopefully see you next time. Goodbye.